Hi everyone, welcome to Ben Sells. We're hitting the middle of March and everyone has made it through the cold, dreary winter. I think we had about 5 days of sunlight since the beginning of December, so I think everyone with this warm weather is ready to start planting. And we've been planting here at the greenhouse since sometime in January. We've got a lot of great container plants, and that's what our subject is today. We've got a special treat. Matt Ross, the horticulturalist from Toledo Botanical, is here today. And he's been doing a lot of classes on container gardening. He's been working with the master gardeners. He's been at the seed swap doing a lot of classes. And we're going to talk to him today about some of the plants he likes and why, and then I'll talk about some of the plants that I have growing here and why I like them as container plants. So why don't we head in the back and take a look at some of the plants we have, and hopefully the discussion will help you. Feel free to come into the greenhouse and take a look around. We have a lot of new suggestions for everyone, and start planting your garden. Thank you. Alright everyone, we're back here in the middle greenhouse. I'm with Matt Ross from the Toledo Botanical Garden, sitting in front of a table full of plants. It's a bit chaotic at this point, but we kind of walked through the greenhouse, and Matt has chosen some of the plants that he has been talking about that he's putting containers together at the gardens. And then I pulled some of the favorites that I have as well. And so I guess what we need to do is just kind of pull out some of the plants and talk about them. And
Sure.
I'd like to know, why you're choosing these plants. I know there's some really, really different ones, and most of these plants are on the website. If you go to the Toledo Botanical Gardens website, Matt has a nice descriptive, informative little page on all the plants that he has and why he likes them. So why don't you pull out, Matt, you pull out some of the plants that you had chosen and talk a little bit about them, why you like them.
All right, this is probably one of my favorite plants for this upcoming year. This is Ganura. It's got a dynamic foliage, really nice purple velvety accent. It also comes variegated. It's nice because it doesn't require all that much moisture. It'll tolerate being in a container with a variety of other plants. It does have a nice flower to it, but oftentimes it's the foliage, and I'm a big foliage guy.
Right.
If you know me, I hate the petunia geranium combination, and I think this brings a lot of nice texture and that soft velvety purple coloration into your containers.
I think that's kind of what we have shared. I've always tried to tell people that there's more to the plant than the flower.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes it's very, they don't understand why they like it so much, and it's truly the texture of the foliage, the color of the foliage, and it's really subtle. So I love it. So that's a beautiful plant. Like you said, the orange flower comes and goes so quickly that you don't want to think about that as you're planting your container, because it doesn't really help you.
Correct.
So,
and right next to that is actually a nice complement to it, the lantana.
Right.
The lantana is going to give you a little bit of fragrance. It's also going to have a continuous bloom, so you will have that flower power. It doesn't require that much moisture as well. And if you train it and kind of cut it back to keep it from going to seed, it's really a dynamic plant. And that added fragrance is a real must in the container. And I've used it with a multitude of succulents as well, like panda plant. I've also used that with things like anemoniums or Irish roses, and they're a really cool plant. They're used quite a bit out in the Southern California area. It's one of the staple plants out there. Really low maintenance. There's one called Sunburst that's got a pink, white, and green leaf that's just coming out. You'll see that in a lot of our containers at TBG as well. They also work well with echeveras.
Right.
And they really a dynamic contrast, good-looking foliage, and even in periods where there is no bloom on anything, they really have a lot of dynamic characteristics to them.
Right, and I think that's the one thing too. From afar, the containers are really going to stand out with that type of foliage. When that foliage is as exquisite as it is, it really does stand out.
Correct, and that's one of the things that we have to do at the Botanical Gardens, is our containers have to look good for many, many weeks.
Right.
And although we do rotate plants in and out, we have to make sure it's going to catch your eye from 20 or even 100 feet away.
Right, and I think that fits really well with the homeowner, the people that come here, because it's a little bit of a contest for them. Everybody wants to have the best container on the block, and you know what? I'm all about competition, and so come on in, and that's, I think it would be beautiful if we could just, select some things with everyone. Go to the garden, see what Matt has been doing. Like I said, these are not necessarily they have to fit together, but it's also a really great way for people to take a look at what's growing in containers, and then maybe switching out a plant here or there to see what fits their style, because they may have that favorite plant as well.
And we talked a lot about plants that are going to be in the relatively full sun conditions.
Okay.
And if you start sliding into the part sun into shade, plants like irisine. This is a plant that's really popular at the zoo and zoos across America because it's a lower maintenance, high aesthetic value to this plant. It doesn't really flower all that great, but that foliage, I mean, you have 3 and sometimes even 4 colors on the same plant. It comes in a lot of dark purples. It'll tolerate some shade. It'll tolerate some sun.
Okay.
Grows quite large. We have some at our garden that we had last season start off about the size that you're looking at right now and end up to be almost 2.5 feet tall.
3 feet, yeah.
And then if you go deeper into the shade, if you want to talk a little bit about the begonias, there's a lot of different begonias that you can use.
Right. Another plant that the foliage, there's so many different varieties coming out of the Rex begonias, a lot of different pinks and deep purples and things like that. Then, of course, there's the old standbys, the Iron Cross and the escargot, which is a swirled leaf. We have some beefsteaks here, are green. They're beautiful. Very easy plants. I like to pair those up sometimes even with an asparagus. Talk about texture again, you've got some great color, but then you add something kind of wispy with it. I've got an ivy here that's great for low light that kind of breaks up the rigidness of the Rex begonia, and I think that's a beautiful plant as well.
We actually use some of the pilia and some of the plectranthus in there as well.
Okay.
Just to add another aspect of contrasting textures. And if you take a look at that pilia, there's almost no better texture than that right there. It's really great for kids. It's very tactile. And it's got a nice, relatively easy shape to maintain. They'll kind of sprawl out in your pots quite well, and they've got a decent height to them depending on which one you go with.
I think that some of these plants are just so different that people are not quite used to them, and I think going to the gardens to see these together is going to be very, very helpful. You mentioned 2 other things when you were talking about some of these plants that I kind of work with too here at the greenhouse, making suggestions for people, and that's we talked about lantana and the foliage on that. It's a great butterfly attractor.
Correct.
You know, think about those types of things. You talked about fragrance. There's nothing better than enjoying fragrance in the garden. People look, you know, it's what you see, but you know, sometimes sound with water, but even fragrance. That's why I pulled this lavender. This is Q Red lavender.
And then having a use, sorry to interrupt you, but having a use for the plant also helps as well. So lavender, you can bring it in the home, make lavender swags out of it. You can use a lot of edible plant material, and that's something that we're really pushing this year at the gardens. And if you came last year, you noticed we had things like blueberries and cabbage in our planters. And it's awesome to see this dynamic contrast. Last year we had a coral berry mixed with red acre cabbage with the lantana that you see right there. And it's just one of those really dynamic things that you'd never think to put them together.
Right.
And experimentation is kind of what led us to that combination.
And I think people have to realize that gardening really is about experimenting. It's about movement. It's about trying different things. And, you know, I think that, you know, you and I both share our excitement about all these plants. And, you know, there's never the right or wrong way to do these things.
Correct.
And it is all about experimentation. And so you put these plants together and you decide you've seen something else, you pull one out, put it somewhere else, and put a new plant in there, and you're gardening. So
and it's great to take notes throughout the season too. So if there was a pot that you really like somewhere else, maybe take a couple notes on it, take a photograph of it, and then try to recreate it, put your own touch on it.
Right.
One thing is that you do have to watch out for making sure that you have similar lighting conditions and watering conditions, and fertility as well. Because sometimes you might have a plant that's a heavy feeder next to a plant that's not going to appreciate having the extra fertilizer. And a good case of that is we use a lot of nasturtium. Nasturtium is a plant you can just let go, and I know you know that. And it's got all kinds of beautiful flowers to it. It's got a nice edible leaf, an edible bud that you can use like a caper.
Right.
You can use the seed as a pepper replacement.
Right.
It's one of those really dynamic plants. It's nice if you want to have a nice romantic meal, throw it in a salad, really brighten up the plate. And at the same time, that's a plant that really doesn't require much maintenance at all. A little bit of water, but in terms of fertility, it's going to be a low feeder.
Okay.
So putting that next to something like a million bells or a diacica that's going to need tons of fertilizer is probably not going to give you the result that you want. You could actually rot out the plant or burn the plant.
Yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to maybe get a little book or something like that on bedding plants or annuals.
Correct.
You know, we recommend people, if there's tags in the plants, to take a little hole punch and put a hole punch through their tag and save it year after year. If you want to do that. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. You know, there's so many resources here in Toledo. A lot of garden centers will be great resources for everybody to go and talk to those people, a lot of experts, and go to the gardens and talk to Matt. Thanks, Matt, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.